Level 1. The morning. The alarm doesn't go off because you never set one. You haven't needed an alarm in 23 years. Your brain simply stops sleeping when it decides it's done, 4:51 a.m. You know this without looking at the clock. You've been awake for 11 minutes already, lying in a bedroom that cost $4 million to design and feels like a hotel room you checked into and forgot to leave. No photographs on the walls. You've noticed that before. Other people have photographs on their walls, family, friends, moments they wanted to keep visible. Your walls have nothing. Not because you forgot to put things up, because when you tried to think of what to put there, you realized you couldn't answer the question. The bedroom is in a house in Austin, Texas, that you bought because it made financial sense for the company. Not because you wanted to live in Austin, not because anyone you love lives in Austin, because the math worked. You make decisions the way other people breathe, without thinking about whether you want to. You get up. You don't shower yet. You walk to the window and look at the city below and think about orbital mechanics, not because something is wrong with the rocket program, just because that's what your brain does at 4:51 a.m. when there's nothing to stop it. You've been this way your whole life. Your brain doesn't rest, it just changes subjects. Level 2. The beginning. You were not supposed to end up here, not according to anyone who knew you as a child. You were the weird kid in Pretoria, South Africa, who read the encyclopedia for fun, both volumes, by age 9. Not because someone told you to, because you ran out of other books and the encyclopedia was there, and your brain needed something to eat. The other kids didn't understand you. That's the polite version. The accurate version is that they bullied you so badly that your mother could identify you in a crowd by the shape of the blood on your shirt. You were small. You were strange. You thought about things nobody else thought about. You thought about why humans were still on one planet. At 12 years old, you thought this was the most important question anyone could ask. Not what to have for lunch, not who was going to the party. Why are we still on one planet? The adults around you smiled at that, the way adults smile at children who say unusual things, patronizing, affectionate, dismissive. You filed that away. You filed everything away. Your father was a difficult man. This is the sanitized version of a story that would take longer than you're willing to tell. What you will say is this. You learned very early that the world would not make space for you. You would have to make space for yourself. And you decided that if you were going to make space, you might as well make actual space.
Level 3. The building. You arrived in North America with $200 and a backpack. Not 200,000, 200. You had a plan that most people would have called delusional. You were going to build companies that changed the species, not improved a product, not disrupted a market, changed the species. You slept on the floor of your first office, not as a story to tell later, because you didn't have enough money for both rent and a mattress, and you chose the office. You showered at the YMCA. You ate one hot dog a day and considered it a reasonable protein source. You were 24 years old, and you were absolutely certain you were going to change everything. Most people who are that certain are wrong. You were not most people. Zip2 sold for $300 million. You were 27. You took that money and put almost all of it into X.com, which became PayPal. PayPal sold for $1.5 billion. You took your share
and did something that every financial advisor, every investor, every rational person in your life told you was insane. You started 2 companies simultaneously, a rocket company and an electric car company. 2 industries where the last successful American startup was decades old. 2 industries where the established players had armies of engineers and billions in capital and decades of institutional knowledge. 2 industries where the conventional wisdom was simple and unanimous. Don't. You heard the conventional wisdom. You understood the conventional wisdom. You did it anyway. Level 4. The breaking point. You need to understand what 2008 meant. Not the financial crisis. Your 2008. Tesla was months from bankruptcy. SpaceX had failed 3 rocket launches in a row. 3. Each launch was years of work and hundreds of millions of dollars. Each failure was watched by the engineers who had given everything to build it. Each failure was watched by the investors who were running out of patience. Each failure was watched by the media who had already written the obituary. You were personally out of money, not company money, your money. You had put your entire PayPal fortune into these 2 companies, every dollar. Your friends told you to stop. Your investors told you to stop. Your first wife told you that choosing the companies over the marriage meant you had already made your decision about what mattered. She wasn't wrong. You sat in a meeting in late 2008 and you had enough money to save 1 company. 1. Tesla or SpaceX, not both. You sat with that decision. The man sitting across from you watched your face and said later that he had never seen anything like it. Not grief, not panic, calculation. You split the remaining money between both companies, not enough to save either comfortably, just enough to give both a chance. SpaceX launched a 4th rocket. It was the first privately built rocket in history to reach orbit. 2 weeks later, Tesla closed a funding round that kept it alive. You had threaded an impossibility. You sat in your car alone after the SpaceX launch and cried for the first time in years. Not from joy exactly, from something that doesn't have a clean name. Relief and exhaustion and grief and triumph all arriving at the same moment in a body that hadn't slept properly in 6 months. You gave yourself 11 minutes. Then you went back inside.
Level 5. The Empire. The decade after 2008 is a story that doesn't fit in a single level. So here is the summary. Tesla didn't just survive, it became the most valuable car company in history. SpaceX didn't just reach orbit, it learned to land rockets on drone ships in the middle of the ocean. Let that image sit for a moment. A rocket, launching to space, turning around, flying back, and landing itself on a floating platform in the ocean. Something that was science fiction when you were a child in Pretoria reading the encyclopedia. You did that. You became the richest person in the history of recorded human civilization. Not the richest person alive, the richest person ever. More wealth than any pharaoh, any emperor, any king, any industrialist in the entire recorded history of the species. You thought about why humans were still on one planet at age 12. At 50, you were the person most likely to answer that question. The newspaper headlines call you a genius, a visionary. You read those headlines the same way you read most things, quickly. Then you move on to the next problem, because the headlines don't change the next problem, and there is always a next problem. Level 6. The cost. Here is what the headlines don't write about.
Your first marriage ended. Your second marriage ended. Your third marriage ended. You have 11 children across multiple relationships. You love them in the way you love everything that matters to you, intensely, distractedly, from a distance that you are aware of but struggle to close. Your oldest child has legally changed their name and their gender and has publicly said they want nothing to do with you. You found out through the internet, not through a conversation, through a news alert. You sat with that for a while. You're still sitting with it. One of your sons died. Nevada, 10 weeks old. SIDS. You don't talk about Nevada publicly very often, but Nevada is there. Nevada is always there, in the place in your mind where the things that can't be solved by working harder live. The place you don't go to very often because there is nothing to calculate there. Just wait. Your close friendships number somewhere between 0 and the fingers on one hand, depending on the year. Not because people don't want to be close to you, because closeness requires time and presence and the ability to be somewhere without also being somewhere else in your mind. Level 7, the night. It's 2 a.m. You're in a conference room at SpaceX in Hawthorne, California. There are 16 engineers in this room who have been here since 7 a.m. yesterday. You have been here since 4 a.m. yesterday. None of them will leave before you leave. The problem on the whiteboard involves the heat shield on the Starship vehicle. It's a hard problem, the kind of problem that would end most engineering teams. You have been working through it for 9 hours. Your phone has 400 unread messages. 3 of them are from your children. You know this because your assistant flagged them. You will respond to them later. Later has a specific meaning in your life that is different from what it means for most people. For most people, later means today or tomorrow. In your life, later means the problem in front of you is solved enough to allow a pause. Sometimes that pause comes in hours. Sometimes it comes in weeks. Your children have learned this about you. Some of them have made their peace with it. Some of them haven't. You know which ones are which. You think about this at 2 a.m. in the conference room while an engineer explains a thermal dynamics calculation you had already worked out in your head 40 minutes ago. You think about it for 30 seconds, then you return to the whiteboard. Because the whiteboard can be solved, and you have spent your entire life moving toward the things that can be solved and away from the things that cannot. Final level. The wait. It's 4:51 a.m. again. Different city, same time, same ceiling. The bedroom still has no photographs. You've thought about putting one up, a picture of the first Falcon 9 landing on the drone ship. Not for vanity, because that image represents the moment you knew the kid from Pretoria had been right all along. Not just believed he was right. Knew. You think about putting it up. You haven't yet. Maybe this week. Probably not. The phone is already showing 3 new alerts. Something in the Tesla production line. A government response to the SpaceX launch window. A message from someone on the Neuralink team. You sit up. You put your feet on the floor. Outside the window, Austin is still dark. The people in this city are asleep. They're walking dogs. They're arguing about sports results. They're sending text messages. They're living ordinary lives. And they have no idea that the person sitting in this room at 4:51 a.m. carries a weight they will never feel. Not the weight of money. Money is just a number. Not the weight of responsibility. Responsibility is just a list. The weight of knowing. Knowing what's possible. Knowing what's at stake. knowing that the distance between where humanity is and where it needs to be is measured not in years or dollars, but in decisions, and knowing that you are one of the very few people alive who can see that distance clearly enough to do something about it. That is not a comfortable thing to know. It was not comfortable when you were 12. It is not comfortable now. It has never been comfortable, but it has always been yours. You stand up, you walk to the laptop, you open it. The screen lights the room. You begin, because this is the only way you know how to be alive, working, building, moving toward the distance, forever. The rockets don't launch because he is happy. They launch because he cannot stop. And neither can you, because somewhere inside you is the same question. Why are we still only here and not yet there?